Hello, and welcome to a new edition of Need to Know, a series of video interviews with companies who are shaping, creating, and innovating in the games industry today, and whose work will have a huge impact going forwards into the future. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Guillaume Bouchard, co-founder and CEO of Checkstep. Hi, Guillaume. How are you doing today? You okay?
Hello, Leo. Yes, I'm good. Thanks for inviting me.
Fantastic, wonderful. Well, thank you for joining me here today in this conversation. I'll get you to introduce yourself in just a moment, but for our viewers' benefit, our talk today is on the Digital Services Act, or DSA, and its impact on the games industry and particularly on games development. So, Guillaume, tell us a little bit about yourself and what Checkstep is all about.
Yes, so I'm co-founder and CEO of Checkstep, which is a content moderation automation company, which in the world of trust and safety, or player safety, if you want, where we help online platform leaders to improve the user experience by enabling them to catch on what is happening online and act upon it, but also to be compliant with this online safety regulation. You just mentioned, Leo, the Digital Services Act, but there is a lot more in the world. The Digital Services Act is for the Europe or the EU. We know that at Ukie, we are also keen to be compliant with the UK regulation, which are coming next year, and you probably heard about it because it's always in the news. It's called the Online Safety Act.
Wonderful. So yeah, should we jump right in and sort of talk about what the Digital Services Act is and its significance for the games industry then?
Yes, so the Digital Services Act is a piece of regulation that is imposed on any online platform, including games. But what is important is that it's mostly social games. It's also all the games which allow you to create a user profile that is shared online. So every time there is actually user-generated content. And for all these platforms, you have to follow a strict set of rules, starting from your community guidelines, which need to be clear, but also enabling an explanation every time you take an action. So if you have a moderator who says, oh, you're banned, you have to explain. That's a big change. It's not the case in games. We'll discuss more in depth, but for an example, is shadow banning will be banned. And finally, if the person disagrees with the decision that you have done, you also need to give them an appeal process. They have the right to disagree about your explanation. So it's really giving a lot of transparency into what the moderation people are doing behind the scene in all the social games. There is chat features in many of our current games, but also more and more voice interaction. People use Discord for voice interaction, but more and more games are integrating voice as part of the whole player experience. So you will have to listen to what is said to avoid unwanted behavior. And finally, you also need to have auditing capabilities on your platform to see what you have done on transparency reporting once a year. So it's a lot. It's a lot of requirements. It seems like not. It seems like it's straightforward. For gaming industry, it's not necessarily the case. You really have to have an infrastructure, a tech infrastructure behind the scene to manage all these requirements.
Absolutely. And I guess it'd be interesting as well, just to sort of cover what the significance of the DSA is in terms of from a user's perspective. How is it impacting sort of user experience?
Yeah, great questions, because we say for the platform side, but a lot will be actually a lot of additional power will be given to the users. So if you're a player and you feel that you have been bullied, or you think that the person is not following the community rules, you can always have the right to report. So it's quite common. I'm sure you have done it, reporting someone that you don't like, but you will have the right on any game. It will be easily accessible. and you will have the right to disagree with something. So for a user perspective, it's a big change because you have that on any game. If a game doesn't have that, it won't stay long. They won't be compliant. So it also means that people might use that as a weapon against you. We know that sometimes you have a team of people who say, oh, let's report this guy just to ban the person. So it means that if we want to avoid this type of behavior, we'll have to be aware of this extended reporting functionality. And another part of it is that shadow banning, I mentioned, will not be allowed anymore. So when you're playing a game, you know that when you're saying something, when you're communicating with others, they are seeing what you're saying. It's not necessarily the case today in some games where you don't know that you have been banned.
Interesting. Okay, and going back to sort of from a more games development perspective, I mean, how do you see DSA impacting games developers? I guess especially those that are relying heavily on user generated content, like we discussed earlier, and be interesting as well to sort of maybe have a think about some of the consequences of non-compliance, not joining up on this.
Yeah. So the game studio. It won't be a big change initially because what you need when you start a game is really to get an idea about how is the experience. You will probably start in a beta where you have players which are very enthusiastic. What will really change is, it's a good thing, it's when you're successful. If you start being successful, you have a community which is big enough, you have to take care about your player experience. And while it was not necessarily the case initially, we know the early versions of Minecraft were a nightmare, but very quickly we could see that they adapted. And today they have quite an advanced moderation system. So for the game developer, I don't think it will change that much. Outside the fact that there are solutions, there are platforms that can help you to make this moderation work easier. We know that Unity has a solution called Vivox for voice moderation, but they extend it for chat. So more and more, the platforms will have the tools, or the game studio will have the tools to set up their moderation system more easily. I think they are doing today. I think any game developer did at some point a slur keyword flagging system for slur. That won't be the case anymore because it's much more involved. People know how to, avoid keywords banning system. So now it will be based on AI. That is the main feedback that you have here for game developer. For game studio, though, and this is your second question, is that what is impact? The game studio are not operating the game, but the operator of the game, often the publishers, will have to really be sure that all these regulations are ticking. You're ticking the box about all this regulation, and they can have huge fines. It's 6% of your annual global turnover for the DSA, and soon in the UK it will be even nearly twice it. It will be 10% of your annual global turnover that will be at risk. And just as a terms of comparison, GDPR is 5%. So this is bigger. Fines will be bigger, but also you can get your game banned. You can really get your game or your online platform just banned from existing unless you update your moderation system.
It's quite it's quite hefty, isn't it? It's quite a threat, really. I mean, going back to the players, then. I mean, how do you see DSA enhancing player safety and actually sort of maybe as well the overall experience on the platform? Does it go too far or not far enough? Do you reckon?
Well, I'm biased because obviously I created this company to help gaming platform to be compliant because I knew it would happen. So I think overall, trying to be as honest as possible, I think it's a good thing. It's a good thing for three types of behavior. So the first thing is that the toxic player will have much harder time annoying others. their behavior will be detected earlier. And it's good. So basically, they will be at the fringe. When you go into the game, if the game explicitly states you shouldn't bully others, you will have a probably safer environment. It doesn't mean that these free speech servers will not exist. It will be just harder to find, and also more explicit. You will know, hey, be careful. There is it's similar to weather forecast. If you have a storm alert and you go sailing or swimming, it's your own risk. But here it will be more explicit. If you go into a free speech server, don't complain of being bullied, because bullying is not illegal. That's the first thing. The toxic player will be much harder. It will be much harder for them. The second one is the young or vulnerable or new players in a game. They will have much more clarity about why have they been blocked, why is they banned, so they can learn. It's not necessarily that everybody is really toxic. It's that sometimes you don't know the rules. You don't know that how actually I can't do any explicit content on this game. Fair enough. You have kids. I understand. And then you update, and you're not banned forever. There will be a proportional approach to moderation, and it's much better. And the final thing is the vulnerable people, so they will be much more protected. So if you're, I don't know, if you're from the LGBT community, if you're very sensitive about certain topics, you will be much more protected by the fact that there are moderators there that will look at it and apply the guidelines. So it will be much more regulated atmosphere, but which is hopefully for the best of the experience.
Oh, that's really, really good to hear. I mean, certainly some positives there. I mean, as well, I guess it sounds quite it's quite a lot of things to consider. So I'd be interested to sort of understand a little bit more about the challenges associated with compliance, and I guess as well, what can game developers and operators do to ensure that their games are compliant without stifling creativity or especially community engagement, I suppose.
Yeah, so I think that since you're putting more constraints, creativity will improve. Unlike a lot say, oh, it's driving the innovation, it will be harder, will be more regulated, games become regulated. I think it's not viewing actually the opportunity of really taking the full player experience from the beginning. Some people call it safety by design. I don't like this name because it's not by design. It's just you put more weight on safety. And the main challenge, you ask about challenge, I think for games will be just to be proactive about it. So probably you will have to have an advisor or one of the leadership team to really take that into account and to professionalize, how do we think about safety as part of the overall player experience. A lot of game designers think about the experience, but maybe put the safety saying, everybody is well-intentioned. No, you will have to have some risk analysis, a risk assessment about what could happen earlier. So it's really being proactive. Also about proactive flagging system, like keyword system and things like that. You have to update probably your games.
Absolutely. So I think it'd be quite interesting to sort of discuss what Checkstep's platform does and how it assists in these challenges. I mean, I guess as well, particularly sort of moderating that user-generated content we've mentioned and how it benefits those gaming communities.
Yeah, so Checkstep is all about centralizing all the information about the player experience and to deal with moderation question uniformly and cheaply. You don't have to develop your own moderation system. You just plug any UGC. So it could be images, profiles, usernames, chat, video upload, but also sometimes just in-game maps that you can create anytime you have UGC. You centralize it, you connect Checkstep, and we will give you the full compliance platform. So it will be just ticking the box about everything that has to be done for the DSA, for the Online Safety Act next year. But you know, I can't give a real advice. Every game is different. I don't think it will stop. You know, it will stop people to create their own moderation system. Checkstep is just helping to make it faster. Maybe not early on, but when your game becomes a thing, like a community for, let's say, more than 10,000 players, you need to have, you can't handle that by yourself. You really have to have a system. So either Checkstep or another online platform can fit the need. There are a lot of different conditions in which platforms can be better than others.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Guillaume, for talking to us today. It was really, really interesting, very insightful, and lots to consider. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you too to our audience today who have tuned in to catch this video. There's plenty of other need to know videos out there on our Ukie TV channel on YouTube. And thank you so much for enjoying this one, and more soon. Thank you so much.